So tonight I have the pleasure of introducing my CAGT counterpart on the other side of the mountains, well, kind of in the mountains, Michelle Barkemeyer. She is tonight here to share with us about what we have gifted kids out in the rural areas. Who knew? Of course we do. I am the Eastern Plains rural person, and this is a topic I'm so excited to be sharing with our regular guests. And so Michelle is going to share us a brief presentation tonight. Bear with us if we have any glitches. She's having some very strong winds. If you've been in Colorado for the last month, you're like, what's winds?
Right.
Yeah, so we're pretty used to it now, but our internet is not. So if it glitches, just hang in there, bear with us for a minute. We'll get back on track. And if we don't, we have a contingency plan because we always have them.
Because we're rural and we have to have them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Michelle, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. I'd love for you to give us a little information about your role in your region and your district, and go ahead and share with us all your awesome rural giftedness.
Okay. Yes, and I'll get to an introduction here in my presentation. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Michelle Barkemeyer, and let's just jump in and get started. First of all, here's our agenda. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information, both about myself and about what rural actually is. And then we're going to talk about parenting and gifted in a small rural area, as well as teaching and leading in small gifted Colorado. Now, most of my presentation is going to be focused on Colorado specific because we are CAGT, but there's a lot of things that you can take and use no matter where you happen to be in the world. So a few things about me. I'm mom to two gifted adults. My entire career has pretty much been in small rural districts. Parenting my kids, it's easy. People think that it is. Or at least I was constantly swimming upstream to get my kids what they needed, while at the same time running to try and keep up with whatever they were doing at the time. I started in a small rural district in Wisconsin where I did my student teaching in a town of 800 people, where our principal was actually half-time principal and half-time fourth grade teacher. That's kind of what you do in small areas. My first teaching assignment was as a long-term sub in a second and third grade split classroom, which was absolutely amazing. From there, I moved on to a tiny town called Dolan Springs in Arizona. They had no traffic lights. The nearest traffic light was 45 minutes from where I was teaching. It's a lot like where I live now in Norwood, Colorado. I've taught kids in all different grade levels from kindergarten through 12th grade. As most of us do in small districts, we wear many hats. And so between general education, special education, and gifted, I've taught kids in every grade level. Currently, I'm the BOCES coordinator. We'll talk about BOCES in a little bit. I'm also a member of the Gifted Education State Advisory Committee for Colorado, where I've been making the small rural voice heard loud and clear for over 10 years. And I also serve, as Miranda said, as the Western Slope at Large representative on the CAGT board. Okay, so why small rural? As of February, Colorado has 147 of its 179 districts classified as rural. 147 rural districts. The smallest from our October count last year has 28 students in the entire district. The largest has 6,407. That's a huge difference. Colorado luckily has realized this and created a small rural designation for districts under 1,000 students. However, that's still a vast range. A district of 1,000 students is able to have on average about 4 classrooms for each grade level. Think about that for a moment, about the options that students in that large district of 1,000 students may have. The ability to actually group gifted students together. Having more than one gifted student per grade or even within the school. Varieties and elective courses at those larger 1,000 student districts, or actually even having elective courses at all. Think about for the teachers, being able to plan with other teachers at your specific grade level, having coaches or specialists within your building. Okay, so all of those things are available to those districts that have those bigger numbers. But for tonight's presentation, I'm going to focus specifically on the really small rural districts. Those that are single track districts, usually under 250 students for the entire district, with some of our districts being way under that number. So just to build some background knowledge for our big city counterparts out there, we have both challenges and benefits from being in a small rural district. Looking first at our elementary, most of our small, really small rural districts only have one teacher per grade level. That means that the parents don't get to necessarily choose who their child's going to have for a teacher. No request for that. For the teachers, though, that means you're alone, and that's a big challenge. The fourth grade teacher is the fourth grade teacher. Sure, they could collaborate with a third and the fifth grade teacher, but they aren't teaching your content. But a benefit to that is that, you know, the kids know all the staff. From the time they're itty bitty little kindergartners, they know all of the elementary teachers. So unless there happens to be a new teacher, those first day jitters about meeting your new teacher just aren't as intense, which is a great thing for our gifted students who might be anxiety prone. Looking at the middle school and high school levels, sometimes there's only one teacher per subject for the entire middle and high school. This means that both kids and teachers are potentially having each other for their entire secondary schooling. You are the math department, not just the algebra teacher. There's no specializing for the teachers. They have to teach it all. And I'm going to say this, if for some reason there's a conflict between the student and the teacher, that can make for a really long 6 or 7 years. And for those of you who teach in larger districts out there, especially this week with Teacher Appreciation Week, you need to throw some major respect to our small rural secondary staff. While most schools have 7 or 8 periods days, our small rural super teachers are actually teaching 6 or 7 different classes every day. Different subjects, different classes, not just algebra to 4 classes, 4 different math classes, 6 different math classes. They repeat, in bigger districts, they repeat that same lesson for 2 or 3 or even more classes, but our teachers are super teachers in our middle and high school. A benefit to this, though, is that our teachers really get to know their students, and they can refer back to previously learned topics. You have a student who says, we never learned how to multiply fractions last year. I was your teacher. Remember when we did this activity? It's like, oh yeah, I guess we did learn how to multiply fractions. Teachers can also connect their lesson examples to student interest more easily because they know them so well. The expectations are also already there for students. They know how class is expected to be run, and they can jump right in with content at the beginning of the year. Another challenge that we face is there aren't curriculum specialists, instructional coaches, or even special education special providers like speech therapists and stuff. I always have to laugh when I go to any trainings that suggest you go and talk with your curriculum specialist about this. That's me. That's every teacher in every small rural district. They are the curriculum specialist. But there's a lot of benefits to that as well. Teachers are usually free to teach to the interests of their class. There's usually not a strict pacing guide that they have to follow. And luckily, Colorado got smart back in 1966 when a group of 14 small rural school districts in the San Luis Valley decided to combine forces to enable them to provide services that alone they couldn't. So today we have 21 BOCES, Boards of Cooperative Educational Services across the state. While most states have something similar, my unbiased opinion, okay, maybe a little biased, is that Colorado's BOCES organization is the absolute best. Through the BOCES personnel, districts are connected. And from my experience, teachers are more than willing to collaborate across district on projects and planning if they know what's out there. Internet is also an issue, and that's what we're talking about today. And when there's a storm, we can potentially lose our internet services. But luckily, due to federal and state funding and grants, internet service is getting much better in some of our rural areas. I actually even have fiber internet here in my town, but mine's through a radio signal, so it's not fiber. but I actually have better internet service than some of my big city counterparts in some of the meetings that we have. So that's a benefit. It's getting better. Remote location is also both a challenge and a benefit. It usually amazes people when I tell them, and I know that there's people that are more remote than I am, and it makes me look like, oh, you're in the big city. But my house is actually 45 minutes from the nearest traffic light, and about an hour and 20 minutes from the nearest Walmart, and about 3 hours from the nearest mall. And we're in the middle of nowhere out here. But on the same side, there's a benefit to that. We actually kids get to get out and play. They get to go out and run wild when they're little, and we don't have to worry about any of the big city problems that you all face in the big city. So even though we have challenges, the benefits are really the flip side of that same coin. Okay, so let's talk to the parents for a few minutes. We have a lot of parents in our gifted area in small rural districts that really are facing some challenges that some of our big city parents don't face. So before we start kind of digging into that, first I want to let you all know that you guys are so important. You guys are way more important than you think you are. So tonight I have a few takeaways for the parents and guardians and family members out there. First of all, we're all in this together. Parents, teachers, gifted coordinators, administrators, we're all headed in the same direction. We need to form partnerships with our schools, and our schools need to form partnerships with our families. And that's the only way that gifted education can work in small rural districts. We also need to learn and to educate our world about giftedness, whether our world is a town of 500 people like I live, or whether it's the internet presence that we have reaching out even further. We need to educate ourselves and really everybody else that we know about giftedness. Our small rural children, not our small children, but our rural children are really, sometimes they're the only identified student within a whole grade level, or sometimes even 2 or 3 grade levels. They're alone. Sometimes they're the only student who really gets what the teacher is saying. The teacher can teach a lesson and that student gets it the first time through and then has to wait while the teacher teaches it and reteaches it to the students who didn't get it that quickly. Sometimes our students are the only ones who are interested in a certain passion area. Tomorrow is Star Wars Day. Some of our gifted kids are going to be all over that, while the other kids are not quite going to get why they're excited. And sometimes our kids don't really have a person at school who really them. And I'm not talking safety right now as in physical safety. I'm talking in if they have a problem or an issue, they feel safe going to somebody and really talking to them and feeling heard. Our gifted children are really vulnerable. But you know what? Our parents and our family members in small rural areas are vulnerable too. Sometimes we as parents don't feel like we have the right to ask for help. There are so many kids that have so many needs. You know, how do we ask for help? But you know what? Our kids need assistance, and they have the right to a proper education as well. Sometimes we feel really alone in these small communities. If there's only a few gifted students, we may not have any friends that have gifted children, and that's a very lonely place to be. Sometimes we want to just be strong for our children, but we don't know how. We don't know how to navigate the system. Navigating school is a hard thing to do. And sometimes, and maybe more times than sometimes, we just want our students to be challenged in school so that they can be competitive when they get out into the world, whether that's college or a career or whatever it is. Parents and family members are really vulnerable. But you know what? Teachers are vulnerable too. All of us are. There's not a teacher that I've met that doesn't love their students and their teaching. They're definitely not in it for the money. They do it because that's what they have a passion to do. Teachers also have incredible demands on their time, which keeps getting more and more every single year. And teachers don't have all of the answers. And that's a really scary place for teachers to be because they're teachers. They're supposed to have all the answers, but they don't always. We're all in this together. So what do we need to do? Okay, so as parents, if you haven't seen this yet, Top 10 Myths in Gifted Education, or even the educators, you need to go there and do this. This is actually linked, and Randy's going to put this in the chat somewhere eventually so that you can have access to this whole slide deck. But this is an amazing group of high school students from the Baltimore Public Schools put this together based on an NAGC article, and it really presents a wonderful perspective on giftedness. I want to touch on some of their myths really quickly. I'm not going to show the whole video because that would take a lot of time, but you're going to hear these as you try and navigate your way through the school system. So first off, gifted students will do fine on their own. No, especially in small rural areas, they really do need more. They need that academic support. They need that challenge. They need the affective supports that are provided by a gifted program. These kids know that they're different from their peers and they need to be supported in order to be successful through school. Number two, gifted students will be just fine in the regular classroom. Yeah, no. In small rural classrooms, gifted students rarely, if ever, have intellectual peers. If they're lucky enough to have teachers who have had some training in differentiation, they might be okay. I don't know a parent alive that wants their kid to be just okay in school, but most teachers don't have that kind of training. It's not provided in their teacher training. And with only one gifted student in the classroom, it becomes really difficult for that teacher to teach all the different levels in the classroom. I know when I first started in one of my small rural school districts, I was teaching 4th grade, and I had a student who was reading at a 1st grade level and a student that was reading at an 8th grade level and everything in between. And how do you teach that class? How do you make sure that every student in there is getting exactly what they need? Third myth, gifted students need to serve as role models for regular education students. Yeah, that's just not going to work. Gifted students learn so much differently and more quickly than their regular education counterparts. It's not fair to them or the other students to use them as role models. General educations just don't learn in the same way, and that's just setting everybody up for frustration and failure. Number 4, all children are gifted. I don't know how many times I've heard that one. All children are special. Yep, hands down, won't have me arguing on that. All children are unique. Definitely, they sure are. But they just aren't gifted. Just as all students aren't needing special education services, all students don't require gifted services. Number 5, acceleration can be socially harmful to gifted students. Yeah, There are so many studies out there about acceleration with the gifted. Yes, there will always be exceptions, but the research shows that there is little to no effect on a student's social well-being when he or she is accelerated properly. As with all education decisions, though, acceleration has to be based on data that a student is both academically and emotionally ready for that leap. When that's done, this myth goes away. Number 6, gifted education programs are elitist. Okay, this one's another familiar one, and honestly, I can see where it came from. Way back in long ago when I first started teaching, there was a lot of fluff in gifted education. The gifted kids went on trips, they played games, they did really cool activities, but all of it had very little, if any, academic connection. It was just fun. And then you look at the lack of diversity in our programs, and that also can feed into that elitist feel. But today, as more and more folks learn about and implement best practices, both in identification and programming, there's less and less evidence that gifted programming is elitist. And I'm really proud to be in Colorado because Colorado is leading the nation in everything that is gifted. So we're killing that myth every single day. Number 7, students with poor grades can't be gifted. This one's a very common myth that we hear from teachers and families, especially once we identify a student who isn't that stereotypical straight A teacher pleaser kind of gifted student, which is a type of giftedness as well. But good grades do reflect ability, but they also reflect motivation and interest. So if you have a student who isn't motivated or isn't interested in the topic, you're not going to get those phenomenal grades. I love Jim Delisle's term for it. He calls it being a selective consumer. It just fits so perfectly. This myth also assumes that gifted students are gifted in absolutely everything, which many aren't. And then this leads to our next myth, that students with disabilities can't be gifted. In Colorado, we are so fortunate to have a twice exceptional cadre of educators at the state level who have been providing professional development about these learners for many years. Students can be gifted in one area and have special education needs in others. And then number 9, AP college level classes are enough. So many of our districts offer AP, advanced placement, IB, international baccalaureate, and or college classes for our kiddos, but sometimes that still isn't enough. Plus, in a lot of our small rural areas, there may not be enough students to take these courses. You may not have qualified teachers to teach these courses. And we don't want to forget about that affective side as well. Just plugging them into a hard class isn't necessarily going to be enough for our gifted kids. And number 10, gifted education requires abundant funding. And if that were true, there would be no gifted education anywhere in the entire United States. Many educators of the gifted are creative and resourceful. While I won't say that it doesn't cost anything, there are strategies such as acceleration, which can be done at a very, very low cost. So now that we know what the myths are, where do we go from there as parents? Well, the first thing you need to do is get educated. And all of you get a gold star right now because that's what you're doing. You don't have to necessarily go out and take courses on gifted. You can watch webinars, you can read articles, you can talk to people who are knowledgeable about gifted ed. That's getting educated. You need to find something that's going to support your child needing something different in the classroom. Did you see the word I used there? I said different, not extra. Remember, we want our kids to continue to love learning, and nothing will squash that love of learning faster than giving them more of that same work to do when they finish the assigned work. So here are some fabulous places to start. These are all links. So when you get the PDF of this, you can just click on them. You have CAGT, amazing resources there. Colorado's Department of Education, their gifted pages are a wealth of information. NAGC, our National Association for Gifted Children, has just a plethora of articles for both teachers and parents. And then SING, Supporting the Emotional Needs of Gifted, is also another really good resource for both articles and webinars. They have some amazing things there. Then you're going to find your people. So these people need to be people who are going to support you, whether it's in person or in spirit. They're going to support you in getting the support your child needs. Now, don't discount places like Facebook and Twitter. You can seriously make some amazing connections in social media. I've personally been a part of an online group for over 25 years. Although I've only met about a handful of these women, they're my people. I can go to them with any questions that I want and that I have. So start with your gifted coordinator. Find that teacher that your kid really connects with. That's going to help. Other parents, either in your town or outside of your town, are always going to be there to help. And then finally, begin advocating. And I know this list sounds really simplistic, but the odds are you know your child's teacher personally if you live in a small rural area. You see them in the grocery store, you see them at the basketball games, you know them. While that can be a really good thing, it also means that sometimes we forget to use that same professionalism that we would use with a teacher that we don't know. So make an appointment. Teachers have so much on their plates, they really need an appointment to be made. They'll appreciate it. And here's a hint, let them know what you want to talk about. Don't leave it vague. Say something like, I'd like to have a conversation about how we might be able to find a way to challenge David more in math. Do you hear that word, we? It's a partnership. It's not criticizing that teacher's teaching methods, it's working with them. Go in with an agenda and an open mind. Have some specific things in mind that you want to talk about and some possible solutions, but don't be so driven by your agenda that you don't listen to what the teacher also is suggesting. Then you need to leave with a plan. Make sure that plan is specific. Who's going to do what and when? Or do you need to get permission from the higher authorities, whether it's the gifted coordinator, the principal, the superintendent, whoever? And then finally say thank you. Maybe even send up a follow-up email. Teachers really, really appreciate being appreciated. So what are you going to advocate for? Okay, first always has to be pre-testing. Okay, this is when a teacher gives an assessment to either one student, a small group, or the entire class about a unit she hasn't even taught yet. This helps her know what the class or the student already knows and helps them plan better. If your child already knows most of that year's curriculum, you might want to consider acceleration. That could either be a single subject, like going up to the next grade for math, or it could be the whole grade and just skipping to the next grade. This is also where knowing your school's education policies comes in. Is there a district policy on acceleration? Look it up, go in knowledgeable. So if acceleration isn't something that's warranted, then there's a lot of other options that a teacher could use. And I just want to make sure that our parents know what's out there. And the first is curriculum compacting. And that's a way for a student to learn the stuff he doesn't already know after that pre-test, right? So instead of accelerating them to the next grade and just skipping the current grade, curriculum compacting takes maybe 3 years of a curriculum and condenses it down into 2 years by pulling out the stuff that they already know, okay? That allows everything to be taught, and we don't have to worry about any holes, anything missing as the students go through. Tiered assignments can also be used in a classroom, and that's where the kids are going to be learning about the same content that the rest of the class is learning. It's just going to be at different levels. So maybe your student is using a more difficult text when they're talking about whatever topic they're talking about. Maybe they're doing a different type of a product at the end of their unit to show their learning. And then finally, as your independent study, a pre-test could actually allow your child to kind of buy time during the day to complete an independent study on another, hopefully related topic. This works best usually when a student is willing and able's key, to work on their own with less frequent check-ins from the teacher and not as much direct instruction. Have you noticed that everything on here has no big costs tied to any of this? Okay, it's stuff that can easily be done in any district, really small, all the way up to the bigger districts. But don't also forget these when you're advocating. You need to advocate for student get-togethers, especially in really small rural districts where they're alone. Those kids need to have their peers. They have to be around kids that think like them. They really need it. You also need networking. Ask if you could get a book study together with other parents, have a parent meeting just to get some information. You need time to connect with others who have gifted children that are just like yours. And then finally, your kid might have some other needs that they need help with. Organization, does that sound familiar? Perfectionism. What about making friends? How about keeping those friends that they made? Do your children need help with that? They might need one-on-one or small group help with those issues as well. So here are some additional resources for parents. This first list has all kinds of summer camps and activities here in Colorado and outside of Colorado, and some of them are even virtual. Costs are on there, descriptions are on there. Actually, I don't think costs are on there, but almost all of them cost something. So you can jump in and take a look at those. And then summer learning is some things that you could do around the house over the summer to keep your kid growing throughout the summer. And then the parent resources is a link to my BOCES page, which has all kinds of books and articles and other things, fun things for parents to kind of check out. Lots of resources for you. So now that we have a parents kind of primed and ready to go and talk to their teachers and gifted coordinators, now we need to talk to the gifted leaders and teachers to prepare them to work with our parents as they come in. So quick and easy tips for serving gifted learners. Here's some real quick, easy tips that either I've used or I've seen being used in really small rural districts. First of all, classroom flexible groups. These can be used with your gifted and higher ability kids. They don't just have to be your gifted kids. If you put some of those high achieving kiddos in there as well, you're giving them the benefit of above level services that's going to push them further as well, and possibly even increase your identification numbers. Intervention times is something that I've seen in so many different districts, especially if it's a whole school intervention time. That works best. If you have everybody doing intervention from 8 to 8:30, then you can do cross-grade groupings with your gifted kids. So gifted kids can have other gifted kids to work with. But if not, you can also group them with higher ability kiddos. This allows the kids to really benefit from time with others who think like they do. Middle school and high school homeroom times. It depends on what high school you go to, but some of them have this homeroom time. And one of the best years I had with my middle and high school students was when they were all combined into one homeroom with me. It was amazing. Occasionally they'd have to go back to their age peers for special grade level presentation type things, but otherwise I had them all together to talk about different affective topics. We could talk about what it was meant to be gifted or whatever other current topic they were currently obsessing over. I actually did have 6th through 12th grade students all in one room at the same time. There were, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 of them, maybe 12. But it was wonderful. It was the best year with my middle school and high schoolers because they could learn from each other. It was amazing. Include the students in your decisions that you're making. So many times I plan out these amazing units for my gifted students, only to find out that they either hated the topic or they really wanted to learn about something else. So I quickly learned to include them in on the conversation and the planning, even in my little itty bitties. I once had a group of kindergarten through 2nd graders one year, and when I asked them what they wanted to learn about, they said African animals and Egyptian pyramids, because those things go together. So we decided to do 2 separate groups with just a few kids in each group. They decided exactly what they wanted to know about, and then I went and found all the resources for them. Everyone was happy, and like the title of Robin Jackson's book, never work harder than your students. Pull those students into that work of planning. And you can see a picture there of one of the products that my African Animals group came up with. They actually published a little hardcover book with our kindergartner being the illustrator because that was her strength area. Next, look into your community for mentors. And I know years and years ago, people told me that when I first moved here, and I'm like, but you don't know where I live. I'm like in the middle of nowhere. There are no like big businesses here that I can pull mentors from. But you know what? Every community has someone that you can tap into. And if you don't know them, someone else in your community does. So start connecting with some of your community members. And if you can't find the person that you want, bring them in using the magic of the internet. One coordinator I know of had this Girls in Tech presentation that she would have every month, maybe a couple of times a month. Boys were invited as well, and it was geared toward middle school age kids. Every couple of weeks, she would have a woman from a tech field Zoom in and chat with whoever wanted to show up. It was during one of their intervention times. It turned out that one of the former students from that very district of less than 200 students was currently working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and had worked on some of the coding that sent one of the rovers out into space. And she was able to talk to those kids. And she came from that exact same school that those kids were now attending. One of the retired gentlemen in my area used to actually be a professor at Boulder. Tap into these people. They would love to have a young protege to talk shop with, especially if it's about their topics. Lunch hour sessions are another possibility. I know that teachers' times is precious, but lunch hours can be amazing. I've held book clubs with mixed grade levels that went absolutely amazing. I have a teacher friend of mine who used to hold math lunches every single day for kids to come to his room and geek out on math. Those are his words, not mine. He would always tell the kids, come in at lunchtime, we'll geek out on math. And they did. And this was 5th and 6th grade kids. Another science teacher friend of mine actually gave up her Saturday mornings for middle school students to come in and do science experiments. They just came in on a Saturday morning. What kids do that? Middle school kids will do that if you give them the opportunity. And then cross-district gatherings. This is something that's really easy to do and usually only costs transportation money and maybe some snacks for the kids. Depending on how elaborate you want to get, it could get very expensive, but it can be done pretty reasonably. I've done some of these with my very small rural intermediate age kids. They absolutely loved getting together with other kids that are just like them, and we did it every quarter. We've done content-based breakout boxes. We've done creative storytelling sessions and other academic activities, but we also included a time to work on affective topics with the whole group. Some districts and BOCES here in Colorado have larger, more involved gatherings that are absolutely amazing in what they offer. Don't compare yourself to those programs yet. Start small and just start building every single year. All of these tips are fast, easy to implement with little to no cost attached. Also look for those once in a lifetime opportunities to share with your kids. Pay attention to what's going on in the world and loop it into the classroom. And I mean those positive activities that we could do with them. While these things aren't gifted specific, they are going to spark the imagination of some of these kids in our small rural areas. They need to see the big world. And it's especially important if you can connect them to someone from small rural towns who are doing this. So one example is an Iditarod. I'd read a book with my kids in 4th grade, and we talked about the Iditarod, and they're like, oh, we want to know more about it. So when the Iditarod came up, I found out that schools can actually send a letter to Alaska that can be carried on one of the sleds. I don't know if they still do it, but back in 2008, they did. My class actually created this. They all signed it and sent it off to Alaska. It actually ended up traveling on a sled who had the driver from Buena Vista, which is just a few hours from our school. It was just absolutely amazing. They actually had the mayor stamp it and sign it and send it back, and it's all official. It was amazing. The kids absolutely loved it and got to participate in something way outside of their community. Sort of outside of their community. Our principal at the time actually did dog sled racing, and so he was able to actually even bring in his dogs and have her give a talk to our kids. So it was a lot of fun. The Great Turtle Race, and I never told the kids this, but this is something that I found while watching Stephen Colbert on one of his previous shows, late night talk shows. He talked about this great turtle race from Ecuador to the Galapagos Islands, where they had tagged all these turtles, and each company like sponsored a turtle, and they were, tracking this day to day. And I thought, this could be really fun, but I'm not going to bring that part in. I'm just going to, we're going to track them. So every one of our kids chose a turtle, or small groups chose a turtle, and we turned this into a several week-long study on leatherback turtles as we mapped the progress of these turtles across the ocean. We had so much fun, and the kids covered probably just about every standard that there is in the study at the end of year 2, and it kept them engaged, so that was even more exciting. Lockheed Martin actually had a space day one year way back. You had an opportunity to send your name into space. And so you could have a poster. And what we chose to do is have each kid in our entire school sign a little rectangle and then sent it into Lockheed Martin. They digitized it and put it on the space shuttle and shot it into space. So the kids' signatures, their names actually circled the Earth like 280 sometimes. Then they send you back your poster and the picture of the astronauts that were on the mission and a little certificate saying that your names were in space. It was really cool. And then the students were able to crowd into one classroom, the entire school, to watch their shuttle touch down via the internet. It was just an amazing opportunity. And we had kids that were going home and doing all kinds of research just because they got excited about this. Pen pals. Lots of classes do pen pals. I had one gifted girl who wanted to do pen pals on all of the continents to be able to learn about the different cultures around the world. Antarctica, okay. Luckily, I happen to know that a former student from her school just happened to be working in Antarctica for that 6 months. And so she was able to send in a letter to her, and she actually met her goal. It was really exciting. Another high school student that I had found an opportunity to assist that math professor that I had talked about earlier. He was doing a study measuring the evaporation rates from several Arizona reservoirs. This high school student was responsible for culling through aerial photographs, hundreds of photographs over decades of time, and documenting the lake levels. The paper that they've written is due out soon, and the student is going to be listed as a contributing author as a high schooler. Pretty exciting. Math Bee was another opportunity that I had with our kids. We actually competed online. It was just something I found in an email. I thought, this is fun and it's free. Well, it turned out that there were only a handful of districts in Colorado that competed. So our school was the champion. And as the champion, you got invited to the national competition down in Birmingham, Alabama. So I thought, okay, let's see if we can raise some money for this. So we had a spaghetti dinner. One of the moms made a quilt that we raffled off, and we had a dessert auction and invited the entire community. And this is what small communities can do. We raised $15,000 in one night to send these kids to Birmingham, Alabama. And that $15,000 lasted several years of this contest. But we took our little bitty teeny tiny town kiddos to the great big city of Birmingham, Alabama. Most of these kids had never been on a plane before. They had never been to Denver before. And now they're traveling across the country. What an amazing opportunity to be able to provide some of our kids. Again, for zero cost until we got to the national contest. There's other contests that we can do here as well. Battle of the Books, Math Olympiad. We do that every single year here in our BOCES, and all of the districts come together to compete. So the kids can talk about books and about math. Just yesterday, we had our Battle of the Books, and I had given the middle school team a project to work on while the elementary was finishing up. And I was just walking around, and I heard one of the girls talk to the girl next to her and say, "Oh, that author is amazing. He's one of my favorite authors." And they were off talking about books. And isn't that what we want our kids to do, is to be excited about those things they're passionate about and find somebody to share it with. Destination Imagination is another amazing program that you can use to get those gifted kids really using their brains and getting that creativity juices out. Future Problem Solvers is one I haven't done yet, but it's on my agenda for next year. We're looking at actually implementing it into one of our larger small rural districts as one of those enrichment opportunities during those intervention hours, because it involves a lot of non-fiction reading. And so we're gonna try it out there and see how that works. Robotics is always a big hit, but find a sponsor because those things are so expensive. But there are people out there and companies willing to sponsor if you ask. And along those lines, anything that you see that's out there that you might want to do that's expensive, write or call those companies and tell them how small and rural you are and that you have no money. And they just might give you something that you never imagined. Ask. The worst they can do is say no. All of these contests give you double the impact. You get the academic piece and also the affect by getting those kids together, and it's fun. The kids love it. And for our high school students, you can't forget them. There are a lot of leadership camps for our high school kids, and these are all amazing. If you don't know about them, please look them up. Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, called RYLA, is for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And something I just found out about recently is they actually have a RYLA for 7th graders as well. And the application's open through the end of this month. So check it out. The rest of these have already closed for this year, but the 7th grade one is open through the end of May. Hugh O'Brien, the RYLA is just a few days where the kids go away to a camp. The Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership is a little longer. I think that's 4 or 5 days. Again, that's only for sophomores, and only 2 students from each district are invited to attend. But what I found out is that if your student is not, and I'm talking to parents and teachers right now, if your student is not selected, once they have like their initial registration period, they will open it up to anybody else who wants to apply that are sophomores. So you can still get in if you weren't one of those 2 that were selected by your staff. Cosley, that's the one that's near and dear to my heart. It's open for current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders to go the summer after that year, and they go for a month into Denver. It's Colorado's governor's school is what this is. Some of our other states have governor's school. And it's one of the most amazing students my personal children and my gifted children at school have ever attended. It allows gifted and high ability students to live, learn, and play alongside others like them from around the state. my daughter still has years later, she still has friends from this camp that she keeps in contact with. And of course, Legislative Day, we can't talk about CAGT and can't do a CAGT presentation and not mention Legislative Day. This always happens in February, and it's a wonderful opportunity for our high school students to see our legislature in action. These are the big things, but during the school year, you also have a lot of other opportunities. FFA, 4-H, knowledgeable, school, community drama and art, music. Get that stuff out there and let your kids know what's going on. They don't read the paper. They don't read the announcements that are up in the post office. Let them know what's going on. And there's so many options out there for your students. In college classes, make sure you test early, be persistent, and get knowledgeable. Many of our rural districts use college courses to help support the academics of gifted students. Make sure you're testing your kids early. Even though a lot of colleges are exempting test requirements right now, you may still need them for a younger student. I would always have all of my 8th grade students take the ACT test as a benchmark score in the spring. Excuse me. I don't worry about the SAT because that's currently our state's high school assessment. So we don't have to worry about that. Being persistent means you have to really, if your kid wants to take a certain class, be persistent. Colleges say that only certain classes can be taken, but my experiences, excuse me, those are guidelines, not rules. So once you get admitted, the student can usually take just about any course that's open. Also be persistent in getting younger kids admitted. I've had students as young as 9th grade successfully taking college classes. I have one that even earned her associate's degree a week before her high school graduation. So be persistent, get in there and really be knowledgeable. Make sure you know what's available for your students. Research it yourself if you have to. Talk to other people in other districts and find out what they're doing there. And most important for teachers and coordinators is to find the free stuff. There's so much stuff out there of high quality that you don't have to pay hundreds of dollars for different resources. The link here shows you, I think there was like 50 different free online resources that you can use. And I don't even have everything on there. I might add more when I have time later this week. And then the other amazing resources are resources that are going to cost something, but they're definitely high quality resources to use with your gifted students. And my final tip is to make friends. Find those other educators that you can share ideas with because they need your ideas just as much as you need theirs. Okay? And if you can't find a friend to collaborate with, email me. I'll either be your friend or I can help find someone who's going to be a little closer to your area, if it's in Colorado anyway. So remember, we're all in this together. We all have the same goal. Be kind, be helpful, and keep our wonderful students at the center of all you do, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, a gifted coordinator, or an administrator. We all need to have that same goal going forward. And that's it. So thanks for joining tonight. There's my email if you want to get a hold of me. I guess now we have time for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. So you ended on that last note about like finding friends. And we did have a question earlier in the chat about homeschooling, and she lives in Texas. I think the name is Cielo. Lives in Texas, but they're homeschooling in a rural area and having a hard time finding peers and other adults, maybe other parents, because gosh knows parents need other parents to talk to about some of their challenges. Right. So, I was going to refer her to, the Texas Association. They do have some great resources, but any other tips that you have that you didn't already discuss tonight that you have for parents who are feeling that isolation, possibly not just from being homeschooled, but just from being maybe one of the few people around?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stop sharing this. I think your advice about that Texas Association is huge because they have so many different things going on throughout the school year. And now that things are starting to come back into person, she'll be able to connect with other parents there. Reach out to someone in the school district where you live. And I know your kids aren't in that district, but they can still give you information about gifted coordinators to connect with. whether it's in your town or in a neighboring town, and they can then share things that are going to be done in that area. So if they're having a parent night, you know, you can come into that parent night. I know in Colorado, anyway, if kids are homeschooled, they can still come to like sport, they can join sports and they can join all those extracurricular things. So I would definitely welcome homeschooling parents to any of my parent opportunities or even my student opportunities, if they made it known that they wanted to be here. So reach out and talk to some of those people at CAGT.
Yeah, and I think your point about also making some of those connections at summer programs too. Like we have a summer program here in Fort Morgan called Kids College, and anybody from any district can come. I had a homeschool parent reach out to me because I advertised in social media, and absolutely, you know, and any opportunity that those kids have to find peers, even if it's just over the summer or it's in the afternoons or the weekends, at least it's kiddos that then you can start reaching out to for other activities and
if you're on Facebook, there's all kinds of Facebook groups for absolutely anything. I would throw a caveat out there though, find one that's positive, because there's a lot of groups out there, even teacher and parent groups, that can really get really negative and really nitpicky. You don't want that. You don't need that in your life. Find the positive ones and it'll really help.
And I did in the chat there link the Texas Association Parent Support Group link. So that's a place to start. Yep. Let me look back in here in our chat and see if we have any other questions. I identified so much with what you were saying. Get creative about funding and always say, I just don't have the money.
Right. There've been so many opportunities that there've been really expensive things that I've wanted to do. And it's like, I'm just going to try. And they're like, oh, sure, we can give it to you for like a third of the price. And you can let all of your teachers use it, not just you. It's like, okay, thanks.
Well, and you know, there's a lot of STEM organizations out there that recognize the lack of STEM opportunities in rural communities. And they have a lot of great like scholarships and grants to support bringing in STEM resources, which aren't always easy. Like not every little school has a STEM lab. Not every rural district has access to 3D printers or, you know, just, and so I think it's great that you know, it's like, you're right. What's the worst that could happen if you ask, right?
So, and I usually do it on email because I don't want to hear someone tell me no. I can delete the no on the email, but
I'm going to pretend that never happened. Delete.
Right.
They go directly to your trash and make sure it's gone forever. But you know, those are the organizations that you want to work with, are those ones that want to support your goals. And as I really love the points that you had about ways to kind of support gifted instruction in that heterogeneous classroom, right? Like, what do you do when you have 2 ELL students and 2 students on IEPs for learning disability? You have a couple of gifted students, you have a couple twice exceptional students, you have a couple neurotypical students, and they're all in different places, and you have to meet them all where they're at. And
that's a brand new teacher.
Yeah, oh yeah, imagine being a first year teacher. It's like, you're like, if anybody says the D word to me one more time.
Right.
But I love the pointers that you had, because they are all very low cost, and gosh darn it, pre-test, folks, pre-test.
Yeah. And not just pre-test, but do something about it. So there's a lot of teachers that pre-test, but it's like, okay, and then we're just going to carry on like normal. It's like, no, you need, and if you don't know what to do with the data, ask somebody. You've got, even if you don't have a gifted coordinator, you've got somebody in your region that can help you, whether it's a BOCES director or whether it's a gifted education regional consultant or GERCS in Colorado. They're more than willing to help you. That's what they're there for. And nobody can know everything. And I know at least with me as a teacher, it's really hard to ask for help. But once you start making those connections with people, it really does get easier. And you would be surprised at the help that you get and the changes that you make and the gratitude that you have from families for just seeing their kids and trying something. It doesn't have to be perfect. They just want you to try for their babies.
Yes. And it is okay to try something and it not work. It's okay. Like, you've learned something and you can move on. We treat such for kids all the time. But I think teachers are a lot of times afraid of making mistakes. And I think maybe that's because some of us have a little more perfectionism than we like to admit. But the worst that could happen is that you learn from it and you do better next time. And we tell our kids that all the time. So it's like, you got to believe in ourselves and practice what we preach.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to say this too. One thing that, you know, TikTok gets a bad rap, but teacher TikTok is amazing. And some teachers are like subverting the like whole pay for resources thing and posting all of their stuff for free online. And it's all stuff that they've done in Google Classroom and in Canvas that's free, open resource. So if you are in a rural district and you don't have those compadres to kind of work with that are at your grade level or in your content area, there's a lot of open resource stuff out there. You just have to kind of like, I found a whole bunch of people on teacher TikTok who just share everything they do.
Shoot me a couple of names and I'll put it on that resource page that I have on there.
Will do.
Whoever you follow, shoot me that and I'll stick it on there because I don't have time for that too.
Yeah, I'll send the ones.
I don't have kids at home anymore while I'm waiting for basketball practice where I can waste time.
Oh, I spend so much time in cars and on bleacher seats.
Right.
In between games.
You're doing research.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I do appreciate your time tonight. We don't have any more questions because you were so thorough. And I think some of that stuff, it's like, it's the stuff that to chew on. And I think it's stuff that educators and parents can follow up on. And so
check out those links. There's all kinds of stuff out there for you to use. Again, free and low cost. That's the magic word in my opinion.
And we will
that's how you're going to get buy-in from your administrators and your teachers.
Can I do this? It's free.
Yeah, right.
I will be posting this recording and then as well as the link to your slides, and all those links should function live. And yeah, Marissa, yeah, you can still get that. I posted the link a little bit higher up in the chat. It's the Conversations with CAGT. I'm going to link it again for you. Obviously, Michelle's isn't up yet because I have to make sure that this is recorded properly and uploaded to YouTube. And then if you go to the link I just posted in the chat, you can find all of our archive resources, as well as most of their presentations that our presenters have generously linked, as well as links to resources and free resources that they are offering. So Michelle's will be right there with them under the May 3rd. And then the PDF will be attached and the links will be live, and you'll have all these awesome resources and tools. So it's awesome. I love what we do. I love what CAGT provides.
Right? So
great.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
So next week we're going to have Heather Baskin with us, and she's a gifted director out on the Western Slope in the Grand Junction area. And she's going to be talking about how they provide tiered support for high school ALPs. High schoolers have a diverse set, gifted high schoolers have a whole diverse set of needs. They're all on different paths. And how do we serve all those kids in a way that is meaningful for them and effective for teachers and educators? And so she's going to be talking about how they do it out there in District 51. And it's going to be great if you're a high school gifted specialist, parent of a high school student, or a high school teacher. This might be a great one to tune into. So
yeah, she's been doing it out there for several years now, and it's just amazing what they've done. It'll be well worth your time.
Awesome. 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 Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Michelle, and appreciate all your time and resources and information. And I'll see you soon at our next virtual meeting. And we'll hopefully see everybody here next week, same time, same place, for Heather Baskin. Thanks a lot.